In this series, Grace Made Visible, we're going to explore God's design for the church as it's revealed to us in a letter written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Ephesus. Now, if you and I were looking for this letter, we would find it in the New Testament book of Ephesians. Ephesians is 6 chapters, 155 verses. And if you read Ephesians out loud, it would take you about 20 minutes. Well, Paul writes this letter to the churches in Ephesus and even the surrounding areas. It's written to everyday people from all walks of life. It could have been written to us. Interesting thing is that Paul writes this letter from prison. He's imprisoned in Rome in the year AD 62. It's also the same time that he writes the book of Colossians and Philemon. But what I love about Ephesians is that most scholars and theologians believe it is the one book of the Bible. It is the one letter in the New Testament that could have easily have been written to the modern day church today. It could have easily been written to our church. If you were looking for Ephesus today, you would find it in modern day Turkey. It was a thriving and busy port city. At that time, it was the 4th or 5th largest city in the world. They had an amphitheater that could hold almost 25,000 people. They were hosting athletic events similar to the Olympics. It was known as the gateway to Asia, and it would become known as the gateway for the gospel. Paul spends almost 3 years in Ephesus. It's his longest stop of all his missionary journeys. He spends over 3 months teaching and preaching in the local synagogue, and then over 2 years teaching and preaching in the lecture hall in Ephesus. Paul made a significant investment and impact for the gospel in Ephesus. Ephesians is about how the gospel connects to us, and then how we, the church, connect the gospel to the world. Ephesians very easily divides into 2 sections, chapters 1 through 3 and 4 through 6. So as we study through this series, Grace Made Visible, we're going to divide it into 2 sections. The first section is simply going to be the grace we get. That is the gospel story that we receive grace. The second section is simply going to be called the grace we give. That's our story in the greater story of God, that we are to give grace. So it's the grace we get and the grace we give. That's grace made visible. You know, the church is intended to be the visible representation of Christ on earth. And Paul's picture of the church was that of a radiant bride. It was that of a diverse community marked by God's visible grace. Now, admittedly, the church has not always lived up to what Christ intended her to be. And because of that, sometimes people have fallen out of love with the church or even walked away from the church. Our hope is that as we uncover what the scripture says about God's church, that we will find ourselves falling in love with her all over again. After all, Jesus still loves the church.